Hello and good morning everybody. My name is Arek Vika and I would like to welcome you to the third part in the series of lectures on microdata for statistics of the European Master in Official Statistics. In today's part we are going to focus on AnaCredit, the loan-by-loan dataset on credit and credit risk that has recently become available at the European system of central banks. AnaCredit is another example of how granular data can be used to provide timelier and more detailed information to policymakers to complement macro statistics. It's one of the key datasets available for the European system of central banks, and it forms an important building block in the data strategy of the ECB. I've been involved in the design and implementation of AnaCredit at the ECB since early 2015, and I will walk you through that process and the results thereof during today's presentation. I suggest that we could start our walk with a brief outline. As always, it's good to recall what we have learned so far in the subject of microdata, and I specifically refer here to the introduction to financial microstatistics, where my colleague Nicholas Grieshaber talked about benefits, challenges, and key aspects of financial microdata. With this background in mind, I will then try briefly summarizing what AnaCredit is. Thereafter, by focusing on which information AnaCredit actually collects and how it's been collecting it, I'm going to talk about the main features of AnaCredit in more detail. Finally, I would also like to share with you a number of references which you might want to check out in order to learn more about AnaCredit. In case you have any questions about the contents of this presentation, or any questions about microdata for statistics in general, my colleagues and myself will be happy to take them at the dedicated Q&A session on the 13th of July. With that said, I have just one more word to say before we start. The whole presentation takes around 25 minutes, and I will now switch off my camera for the rest of the presentation so that you have the full view of the slides. So, let's start with briefly recalling what we have learned about the rise of microdata for statistics. As it might have already become apparent to you, traditionally, central bank policymakers have focused on aggregated macroeconomic statistics in their analysis. However, as analysts at central banks have to perform increasingly complex analysis, trying to identify risks at an early stage and vulnerabilities coming from different directions, macro aggregates don't always meet their research needs. Moreover, policymakers often seek answers that are not easily observable, and the questions they pose can be answered from different angles. All this often results in a situation where an answer to a question just leads to another question. So, policymakers are often forced to rely on additional surveys that are both costly in terms of the ad hoc reporting burden and time-consuming because they require time and effort to design and run. And as you can imagine, this is a challenge for policymakers. In response to this challenge, statisticians have increasingly focused their activities on the collection of microdata. And, unlike it was the case in the past, nowadays technology makes the collection, storage, and processing of high volumes of individual level data possible. And as you learned in the introduction to this block of lectures, collecting and maintaining granular data has many advantages, all of which stem from their granularity. Indeed, granular data give users more freedom to play with the information. For example, granular data can be used to disaggregate macrodata, thus helping to better understand what stands behind the aggregates, and can be aggregated in different ways, including across time, thus increasing the number of analyses that can be performed. Overall, the collection of granular data offers much greater flexibility in responding to a new request by carrying out an appropriate aggregation of the data that is already available to the analyst. Moreover, this approach helps save costs because reporting banks don't have to fill out a new survey whenever policymakers pose a new question. Besides, reporting banks no longer need to bear the aggregation burden, as this is now left to the central bank. Unlike aggregate data, granular data help identify the underlying developments that drive microeconomic events and can thus help formulate an appropriate policy response. However, the maximum power is reached only when different types of microdata are brought together. All this calls for designing and implementing an integrated and harmonized approach to data reporting and production, even if they are collected under different statistical and legal frameworks. Indeed, Integration and harmonization of concepts, methodologies and data production processes is key on the way to a holistic approach to data reporting, which allows analysts to use available data more efficiently and helps reduce the reporting burden. In this way, analysts have all the pieces of the puzzle in their hands, and they combine the information in different ways, tailoring the analysis according to the specific research needs. So, and this is how moving beyond the aggregates now takes us to AnaCredit, the European system of central bank granular dataset on credit and credit risk in the euro area, and an important building block in the data strategy of the European Central Bank. Now I would like to briefly summarize AnaCredit. So, following up on the identified increased demand for more granular data, especially in the aftermath of the financial crisis from 2008, and the need to move beyond the aggregates, in May 2016, the Governing Council of the European Central Bank adopted the AnaCredit regulation, providing the legal basis for the European system of central banks to collect granular information on loans based on a core set of harmonized concepts and definitions. Specifically, leveraging on the idea of central credit registers, AnaCredit essentially establishes a Eurosystem database comprising loan-by-loan data on credit granted by euro area credit institutions to corporates and other legal persons. Starting with the reference date September 2018, for which data was first submitted to the ECB in November 2018, every month around 3,000 banks resident in the euro area have been reporting to the ECB via the national central banks individual loans falling within the reporting scope. The AnaCredit collection covers almost 90 data attributes. The information collected comprises, amongst others, the type of loan, outstanding amounts, original and residual maturity, the interest rate, and the currency of the instrument. In addition, information on any credit protection, guarantees, and collateral is also collected. Moreover, the collection includes reference data for debtors, creditors, and other counterparties related directly or indirectly to the instruments. AnaCredit data are submitted to the ECB every month in line with the reporting deadlines, although some information is only reported with a quarterly frequency. AnaCredit was set up as a multi-purpose dataset for many potential users. The information is crucial for the performance of the tasks of the Eurosystem, the European System of Central Banks, and the European Systemic Risk Board, which broadly monitor the performance of the whole euro area credit market. These tasks include monetary policy analysis, monetary policy operations, risk management, financial stability surveillance, and macroprudential policy. For the purpose of monetary policy analysis, AnaCredit makes it possible to better address relevant issues relating to the provision of credit to the real economy, to which small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone, and the functioning of the transmission mechanism. It also plays an important role in supporting the direct use of credit claims in monetary policy operations and in calibrating potential credit support measures. It also helps to monitor changes in bank lending standards. In terms of risk management, AnaCredit increases the ability of the ECB to adequately calibrate the different risk control and collateral management measures of the Eurosystem, including adequate pricing, credit risk assessment and haircuts, and to allow an in-depth analysis of credit claims pledged with the Eurosystem credit operations. AnaCredit also supports financial stability surveillance and macroprudential analysis, as well as quantitative risk assessment, notably in the analysis of interconnectedness and possible contagion across jurisdictions. And from a statistics point of view, AnaCredit helps to meet ever stronger and multiform statistical analytical needs and breakdowns which require agility through granular datasets. Overall, AnaCredit is an important step in improving and developing new ESCB statistics on credit and credit risk. This, in turn, makes it possible to assess credit dynamics and systemic credit risk more accurately, which, together with the ability to compare data across countries, facilitate timely analysis and help mitigate risks to financial stability. The AnaCredit collection is the result of a long process where the ECB statistical function, assisted by the national central banks, worked on designing its strategy regarding euro area credit data. So, as a result, on the one hand, the ECB requires broad loan-by-loan data which is harmonized across jurisdictions in all euro area countries. On the other hand, the comprehensive set of harmonized analytical credit data was designed to minimize the reporting burden by increasing the stability of the reporting requirements over time. Because the harmonized set of credit data provides greater detail, it thus minimizes the need for any additional requests addressed to reporting banks. This is important because incorporating changes in the automated data processing system of reporting banks can be very costly. Besides, the framework for the collection of credit data was set up with a view to ensuring interoperability with central credit registers at national level and other relevant credit data sets established by public sector entities, including the databases on security statistics. The reporting specifications of AnaCredit build on a wide range of requirements for granular data, and the outcome of a comprehensive merits and cost procedure carried out in 2014, which involved contacting reporting banks and assessing the implied costs and merits of these requirements. As a matter of fact, the merits and cost procedure was used to carefully scrutinize the requirements initially formulated by the users so as to ensure that the reporting burden is balanced with the merits and that data are collected and compiled in the most cost-effective manner. The assessments considered, amongst other things, individual data attributes, reporting frequencies and timeliness, the coverage in terms of types of creditor, types of debtor and instruments, and the reporting threshold. Based on the outcome of the matching of the essential users' needs with the cost, the broad requirements were streamlined and reprioritized, thus resulting in balanced requirements. For example, the decision was taken not to proceed yet with the collection of data on credits extended to natural persons. Reporting to AnaCredit is mandatory, and the reporting obligation is laid down in the AnaCredit regulation, that is Regulation 2016/867 of the European Central Bank on the collection of granular credit and credit risk data. Based on the statute of the European Central Bank, the ECB has the legislative power to determine the data that it needs to carry out the task of the European system of central banks and to adopt legal instruments that have a direct effect on monetary financial institutions resident in the euro area. These legal instruments are ECB regulations which set out the statistical requirements. They are binding on the entities to which they are addressed. Consequently, the AnaCredit regulation provides that credit institutions resident in the euro area must report credit and counterparty reference data to their national central bank. Then, the national central banks are required to transmit this data to the European Central Bank. So, while the AnaCredit regulation is binding on credit institutions resident in the euro area, the responsibilities of national central banks regarding the AnaCredit reporting are laid down in the AnaCredit guideline, which is addressed to euro area national central banks. Then, the AnaCredit reporting manual presents detailed information and guidance concerning the AnaCredit reporting requirements. The manual has no binding legal status. It merely explains the methodology underpinning the data collection and includes guidance on the preferred approach that might be taken in cases where the AnaCredit regulation leaves scope for different interpretations. The manual is complemented by further explanations provided via an ongoing Q&A process where banks and other stakeholders can submit questions to national central banks at any time. A selection of these Q&As is published on the ECB webpage on an ongoing basis. The overall objective of the reporting manual is to ensure consistent and effective application of the AnaCredit statistical framework across the euro area. The entities that are subject to the reporting requirements are credit institutions resident in a euro area member state and, in some cases, foreign branches of credit institutions. The regulation considers these entities to be reporting agents. Each reporting agent must report granular credit data relating to credits granted or serviced by either the domestic part of the reporting agent or any foreign branch controlled by the reporting agent. The regulation refers to these entities as observed agents. These entities are the so-called institutional units which form parts of the reporting agent. The rationale for distinguishing between reporting agents and observed agents is that AnaCredit is designed to obtain a complete picture of credit exposures in the euro area, taking into account the area of economic activity of the reporting agent. All reporting agents have to report data to the respective national central bank, which is determined by the residence of the reporting agent. The term credit is defined broadly under the AnaCredit regulation. Any item by means of which credit is actually extended to a debtor is referred to as an instrument. The only instruments that are considered are conventional lending products. To be precise, only the following instruments are covered: deposits given, overdrafts, credit card debt, revolving credit, credit lines, reverse repurchase agreements, trade receivables, financial leases, and other loans. Generally, credit data related to the set instruments must be reported if the credit risk arising under the instrument lies with the observed agent. This implies that any deposits received by the observed agent are not part of the data collection, as this don't give rise to credit risk for the observed agent. Regarding the debtor criterion, only credits extended to legal entities, legal persons, fall under the scope of the data collection. AnaCredit requires no information on loans to natural persons. Relating to the question of dataset aimed at supporting multipurpose use, it's not enough to just require a comprehensive number of details relating to credit, but it's also necessary to organize the collection of these details in a logical data model. So, at this juncture, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is a credit? Put simply, a credit stems from a legal agreement between two parties where one party is legally obliged to lend an agreed amount of money to the other party, and the other party is obliged to return the amount under the conditions specified in the loan agreement. Of course, in reality, there are many types of loan agreement and financing structures. You certainly can think of a simple loan setup where a creditor extends a loan to a single debtor. The loan may or may not be collateralized, that is, the debtor might be required to pledge certain assets, think of the car in the case of car loans, or the house in the case of mortgage lending, to secure the repayment of the loan. And there are also more complex setups of banking lending where a multitude of counterparties are involved. Think of a syndicated loan where a syndicate of banks provides loans to the operation of infrastructure projects, for example, for building a gas pipeline running from one end of Europe to another. Choosing the right data model, which describes the vast majority of loan agreements made in the euro area and beyond, where there are multiplicity of involved and interconnected parties and elements, has fundamental implications for how credit and credit risk data should be recorded in AnaCredit. The abstract model underlying the AnaCredit collection has been chosen to broadly reflect the general information describing credit transactions. The AnaCredit data model recognizes three interconnected parts of a credit. These parts are the instrument part of the credit, the protection part of the credit, and the counterparty part of the credit. When defining a data model to capture instruments, it should be taken into account that there might be end-to-end relationships. For example, one instrument might have multiple debtors. This implies that part of the information relating to the instrument provided for each pair of instrument and debtor could be specific to the participation of the debtor in that instrument and not common across debtors. Generally, the data model is designed so that there is no duplication of reportable information. Part of the information is common across the debtors, and this information is recorded at the instrument level, and another part of it is specific to the participation of the debtor, and consequently, this information is recorded at the level of the counterparty instrument combination. Let me also briefly say a few words about the data sets and data attributes. The AnaCredit requirements are set out based on the abstract model, which at any given moment in time represents a running credit extended based on the loan agreement. Notably, the three pillars of a credit differ with regard to the data that need to be reported. In fact, the requirements of AnaCredit consist of around 90 data attributes that capture the selected features of the specific parts of a credit. For the purposes of reporting, these data attributes are organized in 10 interrelated datasets, such as the instrument dataset, the financial dataset, or the counterparty reference dataset. In addition to the data attributes, each and every reporting dataset includes a number of internal identifiers, such as the reporting agent identifier or the instrument identifier. They ensure data integrity and specify the relationships between the datasets. The reporting under AnaCredit follows the two-stage approach where the National Central Bank of a euro area member state collects loan-level data from all banks resident in that member state. This reporting is referred to as the primary transmission. In the secondary transmission, the National Central Bank then submits the relevant data to the European Central Bank. The reason for the approach was to ensure adequate interoperability with reporting frameworks at national level, where national central banks are allowed to collect the AnaCredit information to be transmitted to the European Central Bank as a part of a broader national reporting framework, for example, for running a national central credit register. Let me also emphasize that the European Central Bank runs two interconnected systems, which jointly collect and process the data required under the AnaCredit regulation. Accordingly, counterparty reference data is registered in RIAD. Meanwhile, the credit data, that is the data on the instrument part of a credit and the data on the protection part of a credit, are stored in the AnaCredit database. Please also note that while this slide depicts the AnaCredit data flows in a concise manner, in reality the flows actually involve 19 central banks and around 3,000 reporting banks. Let me add a word about RIAD. The acronym stands for the Register of Institutions and Affiliates Data. It's a shared platform for the collection, joint management and provision of counterparty reference data for all granular datasets of the European system of central banks. RIAD ensures the unique identification of counterparties via a large number of commonly used identifiers, including the Legal Entity Identifier (LEI) and specific national identifiers, for example tax codes, business register numbers. In addition, RIAD contains information on the official names and addresses of counterparties. It also stores the sector of economic activity according to the NACE classification, as well as various types of relationships between counterparties. These relationships are then used to derive group structures. RIAD plays a key role for the appropriate function of AnaCredit, which relies on the ability to accurately and uniquely identify creditors and debtors. Of course, this holds for other datasets, including the securities by securities database. It should go without saying that the AnaCredit data collection is not possible without an adequate IT infrastructure. In order to be able to receive, process and make the high volumes of granular data available to users, a new state-of-the-art IT system had to be developed. All in all, the IT system of AnaCredit supports the business process of both data reception and data dissemination, which span multiplicity of sub-processes and tasks. On the data reception side, the system manages the exchange of information with 19 national central banks on an ongoing basis. And at its core, the system receives around 25 million loans from around 3,000 banks every month. And in order to process loan information, the system also needs to correctly read in information about around 8 million related counterparties from RIAD. And since national central banks may send data to AnaCredit at any moment in time, the system's reliability is crucial so that the exchange goes without glitches. And that's just the input side. The output side is equally challenging, where the system needs to support data dissemination and accessibility by users for multiplicity of data users and analysis. In fact, the system enables and manages the access to the AnaCredit data by hundreds of users at different granularity levels and with different business intelligence tools. You can think here of user-specific data attributes and reports, where users receive information from AnaCredit in predefined customized reports and data views which best suit their queries and analysis. Customized reports and views help users obtain specific information on credit, for example by pre-aggregating a debtor's all loans irrespective of the crediting bank, which also helps to ensure the correct usage and interpretation of the data and the results without the need to comprehend all the complexities of the data model of AnaCredit. These customized reports and data views are also specifically tuned to facilitate the performance of the system so that users' queries are processed in the shortest time possible. Furthermore, the system is tasked with protecting the confidential data. Eventually, only authorized users can access confidential information. Finally, the system enables connection and supports integration of AnaCredit with other granular datasets, such as RIAD. All in all, the processing is fully automated, and the system's working is subject to ongoing monitoring by a dedicated team of IT and business experts. On this slide, I would like to share with you a number of references from which you can learn more about AnaCredit. To start with, there are the references to the AnaCredit regulation and the AnaCredit guideline. Then, I also include a number of notes and papers which explain AnaCredit in more plain terms. Finally, I have also included references to the different parts of the AnaCredit manual in case you would like to read more about the AnaCredit requirements. I hope all this additional information helps you better understand the complex subject of AnaCredit. So, thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions about AnaCredit, I will be happy to take them at the dedicated Q&A session on the 13th of July. With that said, this is a good place to stop. I wish you a good day. Bye.